everyone, welcome back to my channel, Speak Crime to Me. My name is Elena. Today's episode, we are going to dive into the third week of the Murdaugh trial. Today is actually day 9 in the trial and things are heating up. Today wasn't a super exciting day, but I think we're gonna get a lot more stuff this week. So let's get after it. So we have been talking about this financial portion of the trial. They have been interviewing some witnesses without the jury last week, and the judge promised to rule on what he would be allowing the state to bring into evidence. The judge basically opened the floodgates for the prosecution to want in relation to the financial evidence, and as we know, this is the prosecution's motive behind why Maggie and Paul were killed. So I believe tomorrow, Tuesday, we are going to start hearing from these financial witnesses in front of the jury. We did start off the morning with a financial witness who testified without the jury in the room, was Mark Tinsley. He's the family lawyer. He is the family lawyer for the girl that was killed in the 2019 boat crash, Mallory Beach. And this testimony really starts to solidify exactly why the prosecution feel like Alec Murdaugh was running out of time and all of these financial crimes were going to start becoming known. So here is what he said. So the family was personally suing the Murdaugh family, but Alec Murdaugh. Alec Murdaugh kept on claiming to Mark Tinsley that he had no money. Mark Tinsley said, I did not believe that. He, was well known in the area, was trying a lot of big cases, and he also came from family money. Because of Alec Murdaugh continuing to say he had no money and Mark Tinsley and the family not believing him, that is why the June 10th hearing was scheduled. He also mentioned that Alec Murdaugh had really no insurance coverage money to cover what the Beach family was asking for. Murdaugh confronted Tinsley at a law conference, basically saying like, yo man, I can't believe what I'm hearing. I thought we were friends. And Tinsley took that conversation like Alec was bullying him into dropping this case, or again, trying to get to hide what was about to come out about all this financial stuff. He then mentions that Murdaugh says that he can come up with about $1 million, which Mark Tinsley says that is not nearly as much as what this family is looking for. There is no amount of money that can make this situation okay. The Mallory Beach's family was waiting on a bridge for 8 days straight as they were trying to locate her. And Tinsley just says he kept on pushing Alec Murdaugh to reveal the financial issues, as the family thought that they deserved a large payout. And they were not going to settle without more details as to why Alec Murdaugh said he had no money and why he could only pay $1 million. Then on June 7th, which is the day, as we know, that Paul and Maggie were murdered, Tinsley started to question the viability of continuing to sue Alec Murdaugh, because he felt like if they got this trial in front of a jury on the 10th, that jurors were going to feel bad for Alec Murdaugh because he had just lost his wife and son. And he felt like at that point, the chances for them getting a large sum would be little to none. Then the defense starts interviewing this witness, Mark Tinsley, and there's a lot of banter back and forth. Basically, the defense is trying to say that Mark Tinsley was not ready for trial on the day of June 10th and that this financial information was not going to be coming out on this court hearing. And Mark Tinsley basically is showing him paperwork that's highlighted that basically says, no, you're not right. And they banter about this conversation quite a bit. And then the prosecution comes back and does cross-examine of Mark Tinsley, and they basically say that the fuse was lit the moment that information became available in this case. And the prosecution insists the discovery of everything he's done would have come out on the June 10th hearing. Again, this is linking why the prosecution, this is the motive, what the prosecution is saying, this is the motive as to why he killed his wife and son. So next we hear from another witness without the jury. This witness was a gentleman that worked with Alec Murdaugh in his law firm, the PMPED Lawyers. His last name is Crosby. So himself and other lawyers with the law firm PMPED had a discussion with Alec Murdaugh to find out what Alec Murdaugh did after he left work on June 7th. And they also were preparing him for the upcoming SLED interview that was going to be happening at that lodge of his brother's. And it was basically just a lot of questioning, like, were you guys going to be representing Alec? And he says that that wasn't really a conversation. They were acting more at that point as like friends. Right. So now the trial moves on to witnesses in front of the jury. And the first witness up on the stand today is Shelley Smith. She is the caretaker of Alec Murdaugh's mom. She says the night of the murders, Alec called her and said, I'm outside, to let him in. It took her approximately, she said, like 5 minutes to open the door, and she claims it was approximately 7:45. I think she even expanded it to maybe 8:30, 7:45 between 8:30. She notes that it's unusual for him to visit at that time, that his demeanor was, he was fidgeting a lot, and he stayed, she says, for about 20 minutes. Then she claims, a day or two later, I don't know exactly the day, that Alec Murdaugh had a conversation with her basically saying, I was at the house for 30 to 40 minutes. And at this point, she starts crying. Your heart feels so bad for this person. She just said she loved this family, and she's just cannot believe, what has happened. She goes on to say that the conversation that Alec had with her about the 30 to 40 minute stay at the house made her a little uncomfortable. So she called her brother, who is I think he's also in the police force, but not in this county. And then she recalls another very weird conversation with herself and Alex about she was getting ready to get married and he offered to help her out financially. She said this was the first time he ever mentioned anything about her upcoming wedding. And then she says a few days later, he comes to the house. He starts banging on the door, I think, of his mom's room. And she says he comes carrying what she describes as a tarp, like he was holding a tarp. Then he left the Almeida home in a white truck, and then later shows back up with a black truck. Again, Shelley Smith is basically saying she doesn't know who these trucks belong to, that, she was just a little confused. And then the defense... So I don't know if you guys remember in opening statements, the prosecution mentions a tarp, but then a rain jacket. And this is where the whole rain jacket thing comes into question. So the defense starts interviewing Shelley Smith and shows her the raincoat that investigators had collected and asks her if she was confused. Was it the raincoat she saw, or was it this tarp? And she says, no, I'm not confused. It was a tarp that I saw. The defense also gets her to say that Alec Murdaugh is usually a very frigid person, and that is kind of how testimony ends with her. So we're really lost right now as to this raincoat and this tarp, because it sounded like the prosecution was going to bring in this raincoat as big evidence, but now she has insisted it's not the raincoat she saw, it was the tarp. Then we move on to the next witness, who is Kristen Moore. She's with SLED, the crime scene unit. She testifies how she searched the Almeida home and found a blue tarp in a storage container and a blue raincoat in a coat closet on the second floor of that home. She tested the raincoat. She found no blood. But interesting enough, they never tested the tarp. I had heard, and I don't know if this is true, disclaimer, make sure you do your own research, that Shelley Smith did not tell investigators about the tarp until September. So maybe that is why they didn't test it, and probably by that point it had been messed with. Again, I don't know if this is true. This is just something I read. So again, do your own research, but that could be the reason why. Then she steps down, and we have William McLevin on the stand. He is one of Paul's close friends. I don't know why they interviewed him. He just established that he was with Paul 2 days before the murders, and that Paul and Alec had a great father-son relationship, almost like best friends, and he never saw any negative interaction between Alec and Maggie. And that's basically the premise of his testimony. Again, not really sure why the prosecution would bring him up, because to me it was a better character witness for the defense. But then we go, and then the judge gives a disclaimer to the jury about this financial evidence that's going to be coming into play. And we start hearing from our first witness. It's a very quick interaction or an interview. Her name is Natasha Moody. She's with Bank of America. And she was basically testifying just to verify that the financial records were actual Bank of America records, so the prosecution could bring those into evidence. So she was just more of there for like a process to get these bank statements into evidence. Then we go on to Jamie Hall, is with SLED. She handled the gun residue kits. She collected the GSR kit on Alex's hands and the seatbelt of the Suburban. Here is an interesting part. So she says that she saw no blood on Alec Murdaugh's shoes. Remember, we have heard that the scene was very graphic and very bloody, and Alec Murdaugh has said that he checked Maggie and Paul's pulse when he found them. Wouldn't he have some type of blood on his shoes? Because we know there had to have been blood all over the floor or something on his shoes. That could be a win for the prosecution. And then a huge moment happens in court, a win for the prosecution. And the prosecution basically says, in your notes, you mentioned that Alex's shirt had small reddish brown stains on it. And he asks her to describe it, and she says they look like small reddish brown spots. And that is how the trial ends for today. So like I said, things are heating up again. We are most definitely going to start hearing from financial witnesses. We also need to know the results from these GSR kits that were just talked about, and now these stains on his shirt. So stay tuned, y'all. Thank you again for joining me here on Speak Crime to Me. Until next time.